The old-fashioned way is always the way it always works. I know many will argue that there's only one man to 5 women or even to 7, all these things. But then the thing is, with Valentine's Day, it's all about a woman receiving a hint or being shown love, and then you reciprocate. So wait to be courted and then respond. Wait for the flowers, wait for the treat, and then all you need to do is, of course, respond to that gesture of love. But if you try to push things yourself, it means maybe you've become the hunter instead of being the hunted. Because there are things that a man should be left to do, especially this Valentine's Day. It is men pampering and showing love to the women in their lives. So ladies, wait for it and just let it happen naturally. Part of Valentine's Day etiquette is keeping drama to the minimum. This is a day when things are supposed to go right. It's a day when everything is based on that day. Forget about past issues, past unresolved things that you may have. Don't bring up the past. It could ruin your day unless it's absolutely necessary. Don't bring out that drama queen in you, so that maybe this could be the beginning of a new phase for your relationship. And of course, don't forget to look and feel the part so that you may be receptive and everything may be good and may change. And on a final note, appreciate yourself. That is the most important thing, because the vibes that you give out about yourselves are the ones that the loved one in your life is going to respond to. Valentine's Day etiquette really matters, and this has been on Self-Care Tips with me, Irene Njoroge.
After the conclusion of an impressive Athletics Kenya Cross Country Championships, Team Kenya now sets her sight on the 44th edition of the Global Showpiece, the World Athletics Cross Country Championships Bathurst 23 in Australia. Lined up for the titles is Kenya's contingent of 30 world beaters, ready to contest with more than 550 athletes from over 60 nations. Enjoy these spectacular races from Bathurst, Australia on Saturday, 18 February 2023, live and exclusive on KBC Channel 1. KBC Channel 1, your true sports partner.
Remember that you are only a farm boy. She's got someone else for other things, and her boyfriend is Reynaldo.
Ruben, go with this gentleman and help him with whatever he needs. Now we can go to the office and you can tell me all about those ideas that you were telling me about earlier.
You're related to the Montoyas, if you know what I mean. Those are Fabiola.
Well, we talked about that before, and you said there was no problem.
I'm sure some women out there are pulling their hair out for your veterinarian.
Oh, well then, they're going to go bald.
A man like him doesn't go unnoticed. I know what I'm seeing.
It's not every day that you can get a well-educated, pleasant man. And handsome, too. Besides, the only time I saw him talking to another woman was with your dad's wife, Malena.
Enjoy a selection of the best. Regina Ray and Tingazi.
Bado hujamwambia unamlike. Umerealiza hujamwachilia mkono kutoka nikuje hapa.
Love blossoms in Mexico with the Trier sisters in Las Bandidas.
I beg you, please don't go.
I want you to be the happiest man in the world with a woman who appreciates and respects you.
An array of music rave.
Make me lie when I don't want to.
Blues.
You are my everything.
Two local gems. And we sit to chat with the Diambo.
You know, I can't even tell whether you're looking at me, seeing me.
With the Louis Vuitton.
Classic comedy.
Makono tu.
Say that
again. Enjoy the Divas programming this February only on KBC Channel 1. Kenya's watching.
Kupata kumpenda mtu kama sikiza tune kwenye simu yako, bonyeza *812 *501#.
Mapenzi si kumpenda mtu kwa kuwa amekamilika, kwani nawe pia una mapungufu yako. Kwa hivyo mapenzi ni kumpenda mtu na mapungufu yake.
Kupata kumpenda mtu, bonyeza *812 *501#. *812 *501#.
Yes, it's the 11th day of February 2023, and from wherever you're watching us from, coming to you live from Broadcasting House in Nairobi, Kenya. This is the Legends Edition. And top in this bulletin, death in Kainuk. Bandits strike along the Turkana-West Pokot border, killing scores of people, among them police officers. We have no deal. National and county governments fail to resolve the county revenue allocation stalemate. And fare thee well, Prof. Former Education Cabinet Secretary George Magoha laid to rest in Gem, Siaya County. We're glad you made the Legends Edition your choice. Our sign interpreter tonight is Byron Abuli. Remember, you can get interactive with us on our socials using the hashtag Legends Edition, and my Twitter handle is Ed Mudibo. Tension remains high at Kainuk near the border between Turkana and West Pokot counties after 3 police officers and a number of civilians were shot dead by suspected bandits. Transport and business remain paralyzed along the Kitale-Kainuk Road and the Lodwar to Kainuk Road following the attacks. The government has already deployed more police officers to the region to cool tension and restore peace.
On Friday evening, multi-agency security teams from Kainuk and Lokichar police stations in Turkana were ambushed by suspected armed Pokot bandits. About 200 bandits are said to have started shooting indiscriminately at the officers who returned fire. After 2 hours of fire exchange, several fatalities were reported at the scene of the attack, among them 3 police officers and a known number of civilians.
Hakuna haja waseme kwamba leo ati sisi tumekaa tunavumilia tumekaa vizuri, lakini baadaye bado tunakuja kusubahisha kidogo alafu wanakuja kutuchokora. Sisi hatutaki uchokoraji, tunataka kukaa vizuri na tunataka kukaa kwa amani.
Inaonekana mpendi watu ndio sababu watu wanauawa, you don't take any action. Iko shida kwa serikali. Juzi kapera huko askari wanamalizwa. Hakuna ngili, hatukusikia Pokot walikufa. Hatukusikia manyumba ya Pokot imebaniwa. Sasa hivi hapa mimi nimepoteza askari 3 ambayo serikali kuu ilituma hapa.
8 injured officers and a civilian were evacuated from the scene and taken to Kainuk Health Center, where they were later referred to Medihill Hospital Eldoret for further medication.
Tafadhali, haya maneno hatutaki tena na hatukubali tena maneno hayo. Tunahitaji hiyo maneno kama ni Wapokot, kama ni kukaa mzuri tukae na usalama, kama ni kuwa na urafiki tukae na urafiki salama.
Mimi naomba serikali kama viongozi wa Turkana, tumeomba serikali waweze kutuajiria NPR, Kenya Police Service.
3 Land Cruisers among other vehicles used by the officers and civilians had their tires deflated, with other several damages inflicted by the bandits littered the scene. More police officers have been deployed to the region to restore calm and order. Ben Chumba, Legends Edition.
Talks between the national government and county governments on county revenue allocation hit a dead end after intense hours of negotiation. Treasury is adamant that it can only get 380 billion shillings, not the 425 billion demanded by governors. The national government will, however, redirect part of the resources allocated to ministries where functions are devolved to counties. President William Ruto is expected to hold talks with the county governors to break the impasse.
The second day of the 9th National and County Governments Coordinating Summit was intense as county governors stuck to their guns as the money allocated to counties was still insufficient. The talks that lasted for the entire day failed to break the deadlock. While the governors want the national government to allocate 425 billion shillings to counties, Treasury says it can only manage 380 billion shillings, 45 billion shillings short.
We must, all of us, work together towards raising revenues in our country. Raising revenue using the national government structures, raising revenue using the county structures.
President William Ruto is expected to hold yet another meeting with governors and other stakeholders to try and break the impasse in the coming week.
But I want you to ask yourself as governor, what are you doing as I work hard to push KRA to collect every collectible cent? What is the county governor of Kiambu doing?
But the summit scored some major wins for counties, with the devolved units expected to get 4.7 billion shillings as conditional grants.
That counties shall be allocated an additional 100 million shillings each as conditional grants in the 2023-2024 financial year to operationalize the national government's program on aggregated industrial parks in counties. The total allocation shall be 4.7 billion to all 47 county governments.
The national government has also agreed to redirect part of resources allocated to ministries where functions are devolved to counties.
The National Executive shall relook into the national government's proposed 2023-2024 budget and programs within the next 1 week with a view to identifying areas of duplication to allow transfer of those attendant resources to counties.
In a follow-up to the concessions made yesterday on the withdrawal of all cases filed by either of the two levels of government against each other, all legislation deemed to be offending devolution will be revisited.
That the IGRTC and COG respective stakeholders shall prepare an inventory of all legislation impeding on the effective implementation of devolution and submit to both houses of parliament for review and amendments. Similarly, all proposed legislations currently in parliament that are deemed to claw back on devolution shall be withdrawn and a consultative process to be instituted before they are reintroduced to either house of parliament. The Attorney General shall introduce an omnibus bill to Parliament amending all legislation that impede on devolution.
The county policing authority is chaired by governors, which will effectively give the county chiefs a say in the management of security in their counties. Will also be operationalized in 6 months. All eyes will be on President William Ruto in the coming week as he tries to break the impasse on the county revenue allocation. While counties want 425 billion shillings, the national government insists it can only get 385 billion shillings. John Jacob Curia, The Legends Edition.
Azimio One Kenya Coalition Party leader Raila Odinga has reiterated disloyalty by leaders elected under Azimio will not be tolerated in the coalition party. Speaking on Saturday, Raila assured his supporters that he had a plan of dealing with the Kenya Kwanza administration. Raila's remarks come barely a week after scores of Azimio MPs switched allegiance to support the Kenya Kwanza government.
Opposition Chief Raila Odinga has continued with his onslaught against perceived rebels in the Azimio la Umoja One Kenya party.
Wale wanawekwa, wananunuliwa kama kuku. Wanarushiwa mahindi kama kuku. That's good. Mkemara vijana. Nikisema Azimio nasema inawezekana. Azimio! Party wangu ni nani? Hata kama hatuko siasa active, bado tuko kwa chama ile tulikuwa naye na bado tunaendelea kuunga hiyo chama mkono na ni Azimio. Hili sijui labda unabadilika.
Odinga's sentiments were echoed by Jubilee Party leader Uhuru Kenyatta, whose own party members staged a coup, kicking out Secretary General and the Vice Chairman.
Hata kama hatuko siasa active, bado tuko kwa chama ile tulikuwa naye na bado tunaendelea kuunga hiyo chama mkono na ni Azimio. Hili sijui labda unabadilika. Wengine wanavuka sema ati wanatoa kioni. Kioni hawezi kutolewa na wale watu wa chini yake. Hakuna mkutano ambaye ijaidhinishwa na katibu mkuu na mwenye party leader ambaye anaweza kuwa ni halali.
The retired president said his family behind the leadership of Odinga in his quest for economic reforms and electoral justice.
Sisi tumejitokeza ya kwamba lazima tukomboe Kenya. Kuna hawa walisema ya kwamba wanaweza, lakini wameshindwa. Na nataka niwakumbushe, kuna jamaa walikuja wakasema uongo hapa. Eti wakiingia State House, Biblia ikiwekwa chini, bei ya sukari itashuka. Imeshuka? Ati bei ya mafuta itashuka. Imeshuka? Bei ya unga imeshuka?
Raila Odinga and the Azimio Brigade will on Sunday visit Busia County as he seeks support in piling pressure on the Kenya Kwanza government to heed the demands of the opposition. Achola Simon, Legends Edition, Kisumu County.
And on that political note, it's time for our first break at 12 minutes past 9. Don't go too far. Legends Edition continues after this break.
Maisha ni mafupi, hivyo si vyema kumaliza muda mwingi katika malumbano. Hesabu baraka zako, wathamini rafiki zako na tabasamu ili udumishe amani.
Kupata maisha, bonyeza *811 *816 hash. *811 *816 hash.
Jumapili hii kwenye runinga ya KBC,
Ungana naye Askofu Michael Wanderi wa kanisa la Christian Foundation Fellowship Kiambu kuanzia saa 1 hadi saa 2 asubuhi.
Ningetaka nikwambie, our Jehovah God, because the Bible says he is the same yesterday, today and forevermore. He is able to take you to a place of abundance. He is able to take you to Rehoboth in the name of Jesus Christ.
Kipindi ni neno la neema, ukiletewa naye Askofu Michael Wanderi wa kanisa la Christian Foundation Fellowship Kiambu. Usikose.
My trust is in you.
We're glad you're still tuned in. Now we go to Kiambu County, where medical practitioners have threatened to down tools, citing neglect of their welfare by the county government. The medics claim that they are being coerced to register for private health insurance coverage instead of the one offered by the National Health Insurance Fund, NHIF. The health professionals, who also decry delayed salaries, have dismissed accusations that they have been stealing hospital drugs.
The doctors and nurses took to the streets, marching their way to the county leadership's office to present their grievances.
We have been put in an insurance scheme that we have not even been consulted about. All we see is some online link circulating.
They are not known to offer these services anywhere in Kenya. And if there's anybody who knows MUA as a medical insurance cover anywhere in Kenya, let him produce documents for us to see.
It doesn't make sense to remove workers from comprehensive NHIF cover where their benefits are sufficient to an inferior cover which nobody understands, to the point that the cover tells everyone that after going to the hospital, if you have maternity and you deliver, then you pay and go ask for reimbursement.
The medics also decried salary delays.
We're coming here actually demanding that all the workers in this county should be paid on time, and failure to pay them by 5th of every month, then you'll be having the hospitals without the workers.
The doctors have also dismissed accusations by Governor Kimani Wamatangi that drugs have been disappearing from the hospital under the medics' watch.
Mtu anafika pale, unaangaliwa, alafu unaandikiwa karatasi, unaambiwa nenda ukanunue dawa kule nje.
Kiambu requires not less than 200 million every month on health commodities. What they supplied in December was only worth 65,000, and that is what is expected to cover December, January and February. So you can see what percentage it is. Looking at that, then you can be able to say clearly, where's wako upande gani?
I wish there was anything to steal. We do not have medicines. We are not thieves. This was a gimmick so that we would be subdued into agreeing to the dubious insurance scheme called MUA.
Governor Wamatangi, however, says he has embarked on a plan to bring sanity in the county's health sector and will not fail to call out health workers caught in malpractices.
Yule mtu alikuja biashara hapa, awachane na kazi ya daktari, aingie biasharani afanye biashara.
Even as the medics issued a strike threat, residents say there is already a go-slow at the public hospitals.
Kutoka 6 hatujaona kama tumesaidiwa kulingana na ile masaa nilikuwa nimekuja. Daktari wa mchana wakakuja na hawakuweza kunihudumia. Hata saa hii kutoka saa 1:30 saa 2 hivi nilitumwa lab na nikaleta result, lakini hata saa hii bado nagoja.
The buck, however, stops with the county leadership as the health workers plan to abscond duty from next week.
Kenya has played host to asylum seekers and refugees for decades. However, due to conflict in countries in the region, the number of refugees in Kenya has now risen to almost 500,000. Host communities in Kakuma say their resources and opportunities are strained as they are asked to make room for those seeking asylum in the country. And as the government and agencies dealing with refugees explore integration as a solution to the refugee situation, residents of Turkana want duty bearers to resolve challenges that exist to ensure peaceful coexistence between the host communities and refugees.
Turkana County, Kenya.
The county is home to Kakuma refugee camp, which was established in 1992, and Kalobeyei Integrated Settlement Scheme, established in 2016. Kalobeyei was established to decongest the Kakuma refugee camp and enable self-reliance and also improve the social economic conditions of refugees and host communities.
Living standards ya wale wanaishi in a settlement itakaa tofauti na wale wanaishi in a refugee camp. How? In terms of housing, in terms of water, in terms of education, in terms of food, na hata some other activities kama za ukulima. Kwa settlement watu wanadeal na vitu inaitwa bamba chakula. They are not given a ration. So wanapewa pesa kwenye kadi waweze kujinunulia nini? Chakula.
But on the other hand, the host community feels it has not benefited in any way and continues to be marginalized and discriminated against.
If refugees are getting enough water, why can't we also get enough water? Because maji yetu yote inatoka kwa hii laga Tarachi. Na unajua the level of water maji yenye iko refugee ni mengi sana kushinda yale. Sisi bado tunachota maji kwa laga. But refugees are tapped water. Na sisi huku hatuna.
They also say their land has been taken from them.
Tunasukumwa tu. Sisi tunaambiwa nyinyi msonge. Songa. And our grazing land is gone. Mbuzi yetu hakuna inaitwa nini corridors. They are not even creating corridors ya kupita. Kwani refugees wakipelekwa kwa ile milima ile border ya Kenya na Uganda, what is the problem? Why should we be pushed all the time?
Despite the perceived freedoms in Kalobeyei, refugees still feel their rights are not guaranteed.
Enda Kalobeyei tangia Disemba mpaka leo watu wanapigwa fimbo kuanza saa 1 na kupigwa fimbo unanyang'anywa na unasimamishwa kwa barabara, leta ulichonacho na baadaye unapigwa. Jambo hili limekuwa tatizo ndani ya kambi. Watu wanalala kwa hofu, wanahamka kwa hofu.
Abedi Salvador, who is the chair of the refugees-led organizations in Kakuma, saying since 2017, no refugee projects have been registered.
Now, shirika za wakimbizi hazipewi vibali vya kuweza kuonyesha ya kwamba wamejulikana na serikali kwa wao kuweza kufanya kazi zao. Na tunajua ya kwamba kama hujapewa kibali na serikali, ina maana hujaruhusiwa kufanya hiyo kazi. So tuko na CBOs nyingi, refugee-led organization ambazo zina operate in the camp na hazina hizo document, hazina hizo certificate of registration, which inawasababishia washindwe kupata ile misaada ambayo wangeweza kupata ili kuendeleza kazi zao.
The new Refugee Act of 2021 introduces a number of rights to refugees and asylum seekers in Kenya. Some of the new rights include participation in economic and social development once proper documentation and permits are issued. Refugees have a right to engage in employment or start businesses. The right to access identification and civil registration documents. Inclusion of refugees in national and county development plans.
You are a refugee and you are found to engage in the act of double registration. Either you register as a Kenyan or a Kenyan registers as a refugee, or you as a government officer or an officer in authority aids or assists somebody to register twice. For both status, we criminalize that offense, enhance the penalty to around 500,000 or imprisonment for a term not less than 3 years.
But despite the existence of this progressive law, both the host communities and refugees living in Kakuma feel they're not able to enjoy and benefit fully from its operationalization, with calls to ensure proper sensitization is done to ensure the vision of the Refugee Act of 2021 is fully realized. Caroline Kamar reporting for the Legends edition.
Kisii County has recently been in the headlines over various bizarre incidents. Over the past few months, several murders and severe bodily harm dominated news media coverage, with the latest incident being of that a primary school teacher or teachers in primary school who were captured on camera subjecting minors to commit indecent acts in form of punishment. In trying to establish what could be ailing the society, our reporter Opicho Chemtai engaged various experts who attributed the absurd acts to increased levels of poverty and broken family structure and values.
Is it that the world is evolving or bad habits are cropping up? We visit Kisii County, popularly known as the land of bananas, to unfold the mystery behind the recent rampant killings. Seemingly unconnected recent murders have made headlines. Locals have diverse views about the killings.
Some of us have entered into business which are questionable, and that's what we call devilish, or sometimes we call it the Illuminati.
Na wengi wamekufa kwa ajili ya kutumia madawa ya kulevya, imejaa sana hapa Kisii.
Mwanaume ameenda kutafuta, amekosa. Sasa akishakosa, akirudi nyumbani, anapata mama anamngojelea alete kitu. Mama anaanza kumgombanisha.
With all this happening, the community elders are finally speaking out.
Wase waliosema hawataki kusikia hiyo tena. Tutumie njia zote kuona hayo mambo hayaendi njia hiyo.
We also want the church intervention in matters of family life, in matters pertaining how people should behave in their families.
With all the attention on this community, the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights sought to unravel the mystery behind the killings in the region and the neighboring counties as well.
Yale yamekuwa yakifanyika katika sehemu hii, mambo ya kunyanyasa wajane, mambo ya kuchaba watoto, kwa kuua watoto, mambo haya yote tumeweza kuongea.
Tumeona ya kwamba na kwa sauti moja kwamba tunahitaji tushikane na washikadau wengine, tuone kwamba tumefundisha watu wetu waepukane na mambo ya mauaji.
Many experts have ideas about the motives in trying to understand the minds of perpetrators who commit these heinous acts. We engaged an expert in criminology and sociology.
What would make a person seemingly normal do that? Vengeance? Is it for money? Are you being paid? Is the person doing it in their right mind?
She puts into perspective what can be done in handling such cases.
We need to find avenues, even simple ones, where we can tame our aggressive tendencies. And one of the places, and this seems to be a counter-argument to what Kat says, is sport.
More serious mental health issues.
We also tried to find out from a psychologist if it is connected to the mental state of a person who commits the heinous act.
Many times you'll find out that if there's a connection between mental health illness and crime, then it would probably be just as a result of what we call like dysregulation. Someone has emotional dysregulation where they do not know how to control extremes. So when they're upset, they're extremely upset, and then they act on that.
And what are some of the recommendations?
Say someone is struggling with schizophrenia, you cannot make this person understand what the action they have committed, the consequences that they have. They would not get it, you know. So when someone has a mental illness, I think it becomes very hard to convict them of crime. But I think the best thing to do would be to get them help first. You know?
It is hard to exactly know what provoked the terrible murders in Kisii County, but a couple of experts have suggested that it all narrows down to the erosion of family structures, a place where morals and values were shaped. Opicho Chemtai for Channel 1 News.
Nimesahau kucheza Loto Moto. Usisahau kucheza Loto Moto. Shinda milioni 2 kila siku kwenye M-Pesa. Chagua lipa na M-Pesa. Paybill number 757070. Account number andika neno Loto. Kisha weka star na nambari yako ya simu. Weka kiwango chochote cha pesa kuanzia shilingi 50 hadi 2,000.
Aulali.
Lipa kisha subiri draw. Welala. Nitakutimizia ndoto zako. Milioni 2 usiamini. Ujumbe huu umeidhinishwa na BCLB.
Enjoy a selection of the best. Regina Ray and Tingazi.
Bado jamwambia unamlike. Mrealize jamwachilia mkono kutoka nikuje hapa.
Love blossoms in Mexico with the trio sisters in Las Bandidas.
I beg you, please don't go.
I want you to be the happiest man in the world with a woman who appreciates and respects you.
An array of music rave.
Make me lie when I don't want to.
Blues.
You are my everything.
2 local gems. And we sit to chat with the Diambo.
You know, I can't even tell whether you're looking at me, seeing me. With the Louis Vuitton.
Classic comedy.
Makono tu. Mashabiki. Say that again.
Enjoy the Divas programming this February only on KBC Channel 1. Kenya's watching.
Alas, good evening, and once again, it's a big welcome to the sports segment of the Legends edition this Saturday evening. I'm Topi Liambila. Defending champions, the GSU maintained the unbeaten run with a 3 straight set win over fast rising Trailblazers on day 2 of the second leg of the Kenya Volleyball Federation Men's League at the Nyayo National Stadium. Meanwhile, former champions Prisons Kenya humbled KDF by 3 sets to 1. The report.
Kenyan champions GSU took charge of the match from the onset with veteran Cornelius Kiplagat, Naftali Chumba and Nicholas Matui dictating proceedings. The Gideon Tarus Chargers won the first set 25-20 despite a spirited fight from Trailblazers. Several unforced errors from Trailblazers outside hitter David Neke and Julian Mbappe easily handed the perimeter side the second set 25-14. Trailblazers tactician Geoffrey Omondi made a few changes in the starting lineup in the third set, which they narrowly lost 25-21 as GSU bagged maximum points. GSU trounced perennial nemesis Prisons Kenya by 3 straight sets in their first match on Friday.
Mimi sisemi na miss my players like Abiud, Kosirai na Meli. Replacement nimepata mazuri. Na mimi najua hata wakirudi wanaweza cheza na kushinda league bila wao. Lakini si ati nadharau timu zingine. Lakini ina depends na vile utacheza na kujiamini.
Well, a number of things are not working for me. In terms of my attack is not working. But I've also lost valuable players. It's a difficult task to recruit, build and lose. Recruit, build and lose. So I've lost 3 crucial players. The captain is away on some duty and 2 others. One of them being Chelule, who was now hitting me hard from the other end.
In other matches, former champions Prisons Kenya humbled KDF by 3 sets to 1, while Rift Valley Prisons lost by 3 sets to 2 to Administration Police.
National soccer team Harambee Stars is scheduled to play 2 friendly matches against Burundi next month. The match will be played on the 25th and 28th of next month and will be the first international friendly matches for Harambee Stars after FIFA lifted their international ban imposed on Kenya last year. Football Kenya Federation said the friendly matches are the initial step in rebuilding the team and getting them ready for competitive international soccer. Head coach Engin Firat said the matches will sharpen the team's skills as they look forward to performing well in international football. The team is expected to start the residential training camp on the 17th of next month. Vihiga Queens stretched their lead at the top of the FKF Women's Premier League log after trouncing Wadadia at 1-0 at the Mumias complex. Meanwhile, Bunyore Starlets maintained their second position with a 2-2 draw against Zetech University at the GEM Cambridge College.
Bunyore Starlets were held to a 1-1 draw by Zetech University in the FKF Women's Premier League match played at the GEM Cambridge. Maria Liambila scored the opener for Bunyore Queens in the 12th minute, while Lucy Achando added the second goal 13 minutes later. Zetech University responded with a bang in the second half, scoring 2 successive goals through Purin and Jerry. Bunyore Starlets remain second on the log with 15 points. Vihiga Queens consolidated their lead on the log after beating Wadadia 1-0 at Mumias complex. Elsewhere, Gor Mahia Youth were held to a 2-2 draw by Nairobi United in the Division 1 League match played at the Camp Toyoyo grounds in Nairobi.
Tunapiga theluthi moja, tunatamatisha theluthi moja ya mechi ikiwa hadi sasa hatari kule kwenye lango la timu ya Nairobi Youth. Anajaribu kufuata bene na Ouma kwake Mungai kwake tena kutafuta Chacha yule
For Legends Edition, I'm Sela Onyango.
Umoja Swimming Sharks stepped up their training ahead of their participation in the forthcoming Pipsa Swimming Gala. The public-run swim club is expected to feature a total of 50 swimmers at the Nairobi meeting scheduled for the 18th of February at the Moi Educational Sports Center, Kasarani.
The Umoja Best Swimming Club will be eager to impress at the championship, with swimmers expressing their readiness ahead of the competition.
We have been coming up really well, and we have also improved comparing with the last gala. I think this one we are going to be the best.
Train kila siku na asubuhi na jioni, na nataka tukienda hiyo gala nikwe Ironman na pia niweze kuachieve kwa kujoin Kenyan team.
The swimmers will also use the championship to prepare for the Kampala Swimming Championship scheduled 20th to 26th of April in Uganda.
Actually, they are on another higher level. I have never seen the outburst of them, like the way we did training over there when they closed schools. So they are very ready. So other teams, be prepared. Umoja Sharks is coming with a bang.
The club is expected to send a total of 50 swimmers aged 12 to 18. The club set up 2 years ago at the public Umoja 1 primary school accords upcoming swimmers a chance to chase their dreams.
Many medals. That is what I want to be. I wanted to become an Olympian swimmer because I've always dreamed of it as a child, because when I was a child, people used to make fun of me that I'm weak and short. And also, Kenya is always picked down from other countries that it is not fast enough and good enough. That's why I want to change the world.
if you support your kid, she will get motivated and she will push it.
Meanwhile, the inaugural PIPSA Eastlands Invitational Swimming Championship is set to be held on 8th of April at Umoja 1 Primary School. Bernard Okumu, Legends Edition.
Yeah, changing the world. What a nice thing to hear from such a young sports person. Sophia Nesbitt, Serena Ouma and Kanyiha Mohiri emerged victorious on the first day of the Nairobi County Aquatic Association Level 2 Junior Swimming Championships held at the Makini Schools in Nairobi. The event, which has attracted over 300 swimmers from Nairobi County, comes to an end tomorrow, Sunday.
In the 100 meters 10 to 11 years girls backstroke, Sophia Nesbitt of Kenton College clocked 1 minute 43.41 seconds to emerge victorious ahead of Vanessa Osimbo of Seos and Pal Sanya of Kianda School, who took the second and third places respectively.
We have trainings at school in the morning and after school, so we do have a break between for our schoolwork, and like just during swimming galas I would study because you have a long break, so there is quite a balance for me. I've been training really hard, improving on my technique, keep persevering through the hard times to just make sure I get up to that level and finish strong to be picked for that team.
Kanya Mohoro of Little Fish School dominated the 12 to 13 years category, beating Yoshihiro Futaki, who took the second place.
I find this swimming experience is that like the training is hard, it's very hard, but like when you come for competition and like seeing the way you perform and improving, it's like worth all the hard times you went through to get to where you are.
Serena Ouma beat Gakenia Kahime and Kailani Inop to win the 8 to 9 years breaststroke category.
I decided to start training, then I changed teams and I thought that would make me go back to lower times, but it didn't, and now I came for this level 2 career.
Raptor School currently lead the girls table with 66 medals, followed by Brainburn with 62 medals, and Kenton College is third with 54 medals. Kenyatta University leads the boys table with 57 medals, ahead of Kenton College and Brainburn Swim Club, who are second and third place respectively. For Legends Edition Sports, I'm Daniel Mwendwa.
National Cereals and Produce Board NCPB women's handball team climbed to the third position in the Handball Premier League after beating New Hope handball team by 57 to 7 goals. In a league match played at the Nyayo National Stadium, the league continues tomorrow with several matches on the card.
National Cereals and Produce Board defeated New Hope 57 to 7 in an entertaining match played at the Nyayo National Stadium. NCPB dominated the match, taking a 25 to 5 lead in the first half.
With this match, tunachukua kila game as a final, so hakuna underestimate any team tunapata. So long as team iko kwa league, tunachukulia ni kama competitor wala kwa worth.
Yes, JKUAT registered a 30 to 20 win over NCC, while KU beat Daystar 47 to 15. The league continues tomorrow at the Nyayo National Stadium with several matches on card. Strathmore will take on Technical University of Kenya, Daystar plays Rising Sugar, and JKUAT will play Nairobi Water.
And that is all we had for you this evening on the sports segment in the Legends Edition. I'm glad you're watching, and stay with us through the week for more sports news, as KBC is your #1 sports partner. I'm Topi Liambila, and over now to Edmund Mudibo.
Enjoy a selection of the best. Regina Ray and Tingazi.
Bado hujamwambia unamlike. Umerealize hajamwachilia mkono kutoka nikuje hapa.
Love blossoms in Mexico with the trio sisters in Las Bandidas.
I beg you, please don't go.
We want you to be the happiest man in the world with a woman who appreciates and respects you.
An array of music rave.
Make me lie when I don't want to.
Blues.
You are my everything.
Two local jams. And we sit to chat with the Diambo.
You know, I can't even tell whether you're looking at me, seeing me. With the Louis Vuitton.
Classic comedy.
Makono too. Say that
again. Enjoy the Divas programming this February only on KBC Channel 1. Kenya's watching.
We're glad you're still watching, and on the Legends Edition interview, on Thursday, 9th February 2023, Prime Cabinet Secretary Musalia Mudavadi officiated the launch of a book documenting 100 years of Kenyan rugby. And in this edition of the Living Legends, we get to know the story of Zak Olo, the man behind the book 100 Years of Kenyan Rugby. Olo is a member of the Rugby Patron Society and was secretary of the Kenya Rugby Football Union in the 1990s. Let us get to hear his story as told to Daniel Wahome. And after this, I'll be saying good night, but stay tuned because there's so much more on the Legends Edition. I'm Edmund Mudibo. Good night.
Good day to you. My name is Daniel Wahome, and welcome to this edition of The Living Legends. And in this episode, we speak to a man who played rugby and was secretary of the federation, then known as the Kenya Rugby Football Union. He embarked on a project to document the history of the sport in Kenya. The end product is the book 100 Years of Rugby in Kenya. And here is a copy of that book that has been launched this week. We host Zak Olo, the author of this book. Buenolo, thank you very much for being with us today on The Living Legends.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, and you know the story about 100 years of rugby in Kenya, 1910 to 2010, a century of pride. It's a labor of love for him, documenting about the sport that he loves. And before we just delve into matters rugby and the history that's documented here, just about your early life, education, going through all this.
Thank you, Dan. I started my primary school in Eastland, Nairobi, in the early 60s at Dr. Kraft Primary School. I subsequently moved to Kisumu with my family, did 3 years at Kisumu Union Primary, and then I moved to Committee Primary, which is at Committee Prison in Kiambu. I did my KCP as it was at the time, and I then joined Nairobi School, which has just changed its name from the Prince of Wales. And I do recall that we joining up was by means of an interview rather than waiting for your exam results.
I mean, everyone's talking about education. How different was it about this interview vis-a-vis what we say admission to national schools, extra county schools, county schools?
Well, actually, the point is that the interview, you could pass the interview, fail your exams, and still get to the school, and vice versa. Yeah.
Well, what was that interview like? What were they looking for?
I suspect that they were looking for character. At the same time, they were looking for your academic knowledge, and they were going to do it themselves rather than rely on the examining boards.
Oh, quite interesting how things have changed around that time. And the Prince of Wales, then later Nairobi School, strong rugby culture. Your introduction to that sport, how did it happen?
Okay, so you went to school, and the first term had hockey and cricket, and the second term had athletics and rugby, and the third term had soccer, and can't remember what the other game was. The point is that these were
Must have been
mandatory.
volleyball and because I think basketball was first term also.
Yeah. So you had to play these sports. It was not optional. So second term of 1970, we played rugby for the first time, many of us, for the first time. And it was arranged along the lines of weight and class. So we had baby calls, we had middle calls, we had senior calls, and then we had the first 15 and second 15.
Well, so there you are, breaking through to a school team. That was a process. How did you graduate through the call system?
Yes, because the baby calls was a school team. So there was 8 houses and any odd number of players gunning for a place in the baby calls. So we had about 100 first formers, and all of you are looking at 30 places for the first for the baby calls team. So you did baby calls, and the next year, if you're good enough, you graduated middle calls, then you went to senior calls, then a few dazzlers moved straight from middle calls to the first 15.
Let's talk about some of the successes you remember and the rivalries with Lenana School, St. Mary's RVA.
Yeah, well, during my time, playing RVA was a second 15 affair. And but Lenana School was a big day, particularly in rugby, and in my years at Nairobi School, unfortunately, they always seemed to best us, and this only improved later on. But in our years, they had the stars. We had good players, but they had incredible players. I mean, they had people like John Akatsa, they had people like Eddie Onginjo, they had people like Nick Kado, and before that there had been John Mohato. They were just Cliff Mukulu. They were just impossible for us. So we only scored the rare victory in the 6 years that I was.
And that is the story of school rugby. But now, coming into the sport and the book that you've done, 100 Years of Rugby in Kenya, we say it came by ship, but what's the story of the sport coming to the country?
It literally came by ship because the first games that were played in Kenya were played in Mombasa and it was normally a game between settlers here and a ship that came to shore. And the best example is the Enterprise Cup, which was actually given to Kenyan rugby by the HMS Enterprise, which was a British ship that landed in Mombasa. So it landed in Mombasa and very quickly spread up country through the railway. And then there was this little eddy of Boers coming into the country and heading for Eldoret because that was their preferred location. And they had a very strong tradition of rugby. And they started playing rugby in Eldoret and Kitale and that particular hinterland. And you'll find that the effect of that was a very curious thing, that the first Kenyan indigenous team in 1981 had 5 from Kitale.
Well, there you've had it, the story of that with Zach Olo, who's written a book, 100 Years of Kenyan Rugby, A Century of Pride, looking at rugby from 1910 to 2010. Now, let's take a look at the emergence of indigenous clubs. And the first one we think about is Mean Machine. And also, just give us the etymology of that name, because it has a story behind it.
Okay, so Mean Machine, the University of Nairobi team, actually started playing earlier than most people realize. And indeed, in the university games, East African University Games of 1975 was won by University of Nairobi, then known as UON.
Yes.
And subsequently, when a lot of players exited the university, joined the university. A lot of the players from Nairobi School and Lenana School joined the university in 1975. They then went on to form a team for 1977. And that team was University of Nairobi, but they had an experience. They had an experience that gave them the name Mean Machine. And that was a movie that was shot in the US some time back. And it was about prisoners and how they put together a team to play against the warders. And the movie was known as Mean Machine. And that's where they get the name. So in 1977, they play for the first time in Kenya Cup. They win it. The Mean Machine was entrenched.
Mwamba. Let's talk about what you call what you say in your book is the Declaration of Independence.
Right.
The formation of Mwamba, but there was also Miro.
Yes. So these guys who joined the university played for Mean Machine. 3 years later, they are leaving. There's a very large number of them. And there's also people coming out of Black Blood who had also been formed in the interim period.
That is Black Blood Kenyatta University.
That's Kenyatta University. And these people got to go somewhere. They don't want to go to the main clubs. Some of them may have suffered a certain level of discrimination after school. Before joining university, they went to Impalas, they went to the nondescripts of this world, they went to Kenya Harlequins. And Chris Jenga does allude to it in the book. He actually states it, that they needed somewhere where they could go and operate as indigenous players. So Mwamba is formed by these very guys. So many of them came out of the university at that time. Some of the more notable ones were Justus Muga. He was at the founding of Mwamba. They had people like Fred Ojiambo. You had people like Frank Ojiambo. You had people like Tom Okech. So they actually set up Mwamba, established Mwamba.
Mwamba itself, the impact that it had. Actually, you played for Mwamba before your career was cut short. Going on to win that Kenya Cup, what was that moment for Mwamba? A young club, 100% indigenous players.
It was an incredible moment and led to many good things because it opened up the eyes of younger players that they could come to indigenous clubs and make it work out. And you know, Mwamba was a self-supporting club. Mwamba played its rugby within the city center. And therefore, a lot of the
place now is known as a Green Park Terminus.
That's
Railway
correct.
Club.
That's correct. So the younger players who could not find the time and resources to go to the bigger clubs who are in the suburbs of the city found it very convenient to play at Mwamba. And after the game, you walk into town and catch your transport. So it was a moment of discovery for many players who, in fact, Mwamba got players who had never played rugby before, and they came and played rugby at Mwamba.
And the story of Mwamba players and all that, let's talk about now sevens, because Mwamba had this, brand of rugby that came up. You'd have to go back to around 84, 85, 86. There was this group of people who came together, Watembezi pace setters.
Yeah.
And went played in Dubai and eventually got an invitation to Hong Kong. Yeah. What's the story of the Watembezi pace setters? Actually, you've been their chair.
Yes, that's right. Watembezi pace setters started off as a bunch of guys who used to play together in the Ngong Road clubs. And they decided that they would set up a team that would go and play rugby outside the country. But the genesis was one Cliff Mukulu working in Dubai in 1982. And he got to meet up with the Dubai Exiles, yes, where there was an international tournament that was being played. And he offered to bring a team from Kenya. So 82, they go off. They do reasonably well. 83, they go and win. 84, they go and win. And that established Kenya's credentials as a rugby playing nation, a sevens playing nation, because arising from there, they were then invited to Hong Kong Sevens in 1986. In the meantime, now that you mentioned Mwamba, in 1984, Mwamba won all the sevens tournaments in the country.
Yes.
And the dominance was such that at the Gestetna Sevens, which was played in Parklands in those days, Mwamba B actually beat Mwamba A to win the tournament.
Moving on, this culture of sevens, it grew, and eventually sometime, maybe around 95, 96, the rugby patrons came together and created the Safari Sevens.
Yeah.
What's the story of this tournament that, captured people?
Yeah.
And 27 years on, when you hear the sevens, you just know this is one to look out for.
Yes, I'll take you a bit back. Before the Safari Sevens, Watembezi Pet Setters had toured globally. And basically they were touring as a sevens playing side. So from 1990 to 1996, they had been doing the Singapore Sevens.
Yeah.
And did it reasonably well. In fact, they did so well that in 1990, Eddie Rombo was voted the most valuable player. And that ahead of the Scottish captain at the time, Gavin Hastings, who is an absolute legend. Rombo did better than him. Mm-hmm. So our sevens credentials were set, and kudos to the rugby football RFUEA officials who at that time included John Lloyd, it included Robin Cahill, it included George Kariuki, that they and Dennis Awori, they had the foresight to look at this seventh situation and say, can we not translate this into a Kenyan tournament that attracts equally the world? And mind you, at the time, rugby sevens was actually coming up as, and still is, one of the fastest growing games on earth. And that's why it subsequently accepted at the Olympics.
Yes.
In 1993, I remember attending the inaugural Rugby World Cup sevens in Scotland. Mm-hmm. And that gave it a fillip. After that, rugby sevens just exploded. And our guys here looked at it and said, let's do a tournament. And it was led by Robin Cahill. Mm-hmm. And they set up Safari Sevens. And indeed, it did not disappoint. It went on to become easily the most famous tournament, rugby tournament in the country and possibly in Africa.
Now let's talk about 15s. Kenya has played the British Lions, but today we can't get close. If we were to play the British and Irish Lions, I think they'll use a school system where it gets to 62, game comes to a close. Yeah. But what's the story of 15s?
15s is a highly technical game. It's also players have grown bigger. Mm-hmm. It's extremely demanding. And in the earlier days, we had, and this was basically a white game. And a lot of the white players were from the farming areas. Mm-hmm. They were bigger than our black boys were. And they were able to, and a lot of them had also learned rugby abroad when they were from their home countries. So they were able to hold their own against the British Lions, who first visited us in 1953. And the scores were nothing to write home about, were 50 to 13 or something like that. And they came again subsequently, and again the scores were reasonable. We had South Africa, the Springboks passed through here. We had Wales, and all the time the scores were nothing to write home about. They were not 100-1 or anything like that. Today, if we played the British Lions, I shudder to think what it'd be like, simply because our 15s game has not developed to the extent that theirs has. Mm-hmm. So the gap has grown bigger, simply because of professionalism. The game is professional out there. Here it's still amateur.
And I think one of the biggest stories came about in 1985. Kenya playing against Zimbabwe, and winning against Zimbabwe at that time was the same as if Harambee Stars go and beat a team like Argentina in football.
Absolutely. It was the first time we'd ever won against Zimbabwe. And that was a major coup. In fact, after that, things have never been the same again for Zimbabwe, because we had come of age, and unfortunately they were slipping.
And looking forward, I mean, when the team that played Zimbabwe, maybe with the exception of, I think, the late Absalom Bimbo Mutere, there was the late Jimmy Green Owino, but it was good to see their families there, getting to see them honored at the Victoria Cup. What was that moment for your generation of players?
It was an incredible moment, and I do remember that two guys were actually represented by their sons who have never had a prouder moment in their lives, and that was Agria Wimbo and Deva Wimbo. Their sons actually represented them. That is one of the pictures in this book that we cherish, because it showed recognition of those who had got us where we are.
Now, let's talk about spreading the game to the country. You mentioned Black Blood Kenyatta University. That was, it was a teaching college. I know previously you've hosted Dr. Michael Tanko Tieno here, and he told the story. But at that point, when you were serving with the union, you saw the initiative of the teachers to try and spread the game. Such in the 90s, we started seeing Njoro, Nakuru, then suddenly Kakamega winning the national titles. Yeah. What was the contribution of these teachers?
It was immense. It really was. And so these guys got together towards the end of the 80s and decided that because they were going to be posted all over the country, they were the right people to spread the game. And fortunately for them, they had a listening ear at the union. One Samagutu was treasurer, and they listened to them and put forward a case to the union. And we did some funding. It was modest, very modest funding. But again, they were very modest people. They were prepared to spread the game at a very nominal cost, quite often at a cost to themselves, more than anything else. And I do remember some of the stories, some of the reports they filed were absolutely horrifying. For example, going to Cardinal Otunga, and the headmaster said, no, you cannot hold a clinic here. And they walked out on a Saturday morning. And they walked out, and on the way out, at the gate, the boys came running. They said, it's okay, come back, we've convinced him. So that sort of story, it was amazing the stuff that they went through.
Career opportunities through rugby. We've seen Edward Rombo played rugby league as he studied law in the UK. Eric Kibe is there, Humphrey Kayange, William Baka, Collins Injera. Those are the ones I've mentioned. What's the story you've seen around this?
One thing I have to point out is that up to about the 90s, up to the early 90s, most rugby players in this country were fairly successful people in their professions. They were almost all professionals.
You are one of them.
Well, thank you very much. I may not have been as successful as the others. But it's only when people like Mwamba came on board, as I said earlier, we started accepting boys who had not played rugby before. And they were from all walks of life. And therefore, it became necessary to find a way to keep them in rugby. And at the same time, they had to make a living. And fortunately, this was now possible because of the spread of the game. It has not gone as far as we would like it to go, but people like Eddie Rombo, people like Humphrey Kayange, people like Collins Injera, I'm not saying they made a living out of it, but they were able to cut out a fairly decent lifestyle while at the same time playing rugby. We still haven't had professional rugby as such. Eddie Rombo and Eric Kibe went out there and played. William Baka played a couple of seasons. Oscar Osir and Ben Aimba went and played for Cornish Pirates for a year or two. But the only people who really made a living out of it were Eddie Rombo and Eric Kibe. We're still hoping that going forward, we will have a situation where our boys are making a living from playing rugby.
Now, as we conclude, let me hand the book to you. I know you've mentioned to me some excerpt that you'd like to give to us.
Yes, I'd like to read the back, which I think encapsulates what this book is about. It's 100 years of rugby in Kenya, the origins, development, and history of the game in East Africa Territory and Kenya in particular is documented in snippets in a variety of publications and remains largely unavailable to the rugby enthusiast and the Kenyan sportsman or historian. The rugby administrator struggles to trace the history of development of the game, including past fixtures results, while the younger Kenyan enthusiast lacks informative reference on the game. So this is all rendered into a hardcover, comfortable book, format that throbs with life and color, inviting the reader to come back again and again.
And congratulations for the book launch.
Thank you very much.
All right. Well, Ziggy Marley has a song known as Tomorrow People. In the song, he asks, tomorrow people, where is your past? And I would like to paraphrase this. Kenya's future sports stars. Specifically, Kenya's future rugby stars. Do you know your past so that you can have a real great future?
And Bob Marley says, we know where we're coming from. We know where we're going.
Right. Father and son, musical family, giving us the quotes for this. This book has been authored by Zach Olo, and thank you very much for being our guest on The Living Legends.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Thank you for giving us your time. Thank you very much for being with us. Have a good day. I am Daniel Wahome.
Nimesahau kucheza Loto Moto. Usisahau kucheza Loto Moto. Shinda milioni 2 kila siku kwenye M-Pesa. Chagua lipa na M-Pesa. Paybill number 757070. Account number andika neno Loto. Kisha weka star na nambari yako ya simu. Weka kiwango chochote cha pesa kuanzia shilingi 50 hadi 2000.
Aulali.
Lipa kisha subiri draw. Welala. Nitakutimizia ndoto zako. Milioni 2 usiamini. Ujumbe huu umeidhinishwa na BCLB.
Enjoy a selection of the best. Regina Ray and Tingazi.
Bado hujamwambia unamlike. Umerealize hujamwachilia mkono kutoka nikuje hapa.
Love blossoms in Mexico with the Trier sisters in Las Bandidas.
I beg you, please don't go. Want you to be the happiest man in the world with a woman who appreciates and respects you.
An array of music rave.
Make me lie when I don't want to.
Blues.
You are my everything.
Two local gems. And we sit to chat with the Thiambo.
You know, I can't even tell whether you're looking at me, seeing me. With the Louis Vuitton.
Classic comedy.
Makono tu.
Mashabiki.
Say that again.
Enjoy the Device programming this February only on KBC Channel 1. Kenya's watching.
After the conclusion of an impressive Athletics Kenya Cross Country Championships, Team Kenya now sets her sight on the 44th edition